Hello student, how are you all? I hope you all are alright. Today we are going to read about the development of the drama to 1561, the beginning of English drama miracle plays. The history of English drama takes us back to the century succeeding the coming of the Normans. The earliest mention of any dramatic representation in this country referring to the performance of Latin play in honor of Saint Catherine at Dunstable about 1110. By the time of Norman conquest, a form of religious drama which in the first instant had evolved out of the rich symbolic liturgy of church had already established itself in France, and as a matter of course it soon found its way into England. Its purpose was directly didactic, that is, it was the work of ecclesiastical authors who used it as a means of instructing the unlettered masses in the truths of their religion. To begin with, the church had this drama under complete control. The performances were given in the sacred buildings themselves. The priests were the actors and the language employed was the Latin of the service. But as the mastery or but as the mystery or miracle play as it was called increased in popularity, and on great occasions largely the larger crowd thronged about the church, it became necessary to remove the stage from the interior of the building to the porch. Later it was taken from porch into the churchyard, and finally from the precincts of the church altogether to the village green or city street. Laymen at the same time began to take part in the performances, and presently they superseded the clerical actors entirely, while the vernacular tongue, first French, then English, was substituted for the original Latin. But as the religious drama in England did not reach its height till the 14th century, from which time onward at the festival of Corpus Christi in early summer miracle plays were represented in nearly all our last town in great connected sequences or cycles, arranged to exhibit the whole history of the fall of man and his redemption. These Corpus Christi plays, or collective mysteries as they are sometimes called, were apportioned among the trading guilds of the different towns, each one of which took charge of its own particular play. Their performance occupied several days, for these cycles have come down to us of complete. The Chester cycle of 25 days, the Coventry of 42, the Wakefield of 31, and the York of 48. Each of these begins with the creation of the world and the fall of man, and after dealing with such prophetic themes as the flood, the sacrifice of Isaac, and the exodus from Egypt, goes on the elaborate the last scene in the life of Christ, the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, and closes with the last judgment. In the literary quality they are of course crude, but here and there they touch the note of pathos, as in the story of Abraham and Isaac, and the note of tragedy, and as in the scene of crucifixion, while the occasional introduction of comic element, as notably in the Shepherd plays of the Wakefield series, which are in fact rough country farces only slightly connected with their context, shows even more clearly the growth of the dramatic sense. This religious performance lasted well on into the 16th century, and there is good reason to think that Shakespeare must have witnessed once at least those which during his boyhood were still being given annually at Coventry. Hamlet's advice to the players not to out Herod recalls and ranting braggart Herod of the old miracle plays, the morality plays and interludes. A later stage in the evolution of drama is marked by the morality play. This, like the miracle play, was didactic, but its character, instead of being taken from sacred narrative or the legends of the saints, were personified abstraction. The rise of this form of drama was very natural at the time when allegorical poetry was immensely popular. All sorts of mental and the moral qualities thus appeared embodied in type: science, perseverance, mundus, free will, and five senses of seven deadly sins, separately or together. Good and bad angels nowadays, young England, lusty Juventus, Hanuman, Janus, every man. Among such personifications, there was generally a place of devil who had held a prominent position in the miracle plays. The later introduction of much importance was the so-called vice, who was some humorous incarnation of evil taken on the comic side, and as such was the recognized fun maker of the piece. He sometimes scored a tremendous popular success by jumping on the devil's back, sticking thorns into him, belaboring him with a dagger of lath, and making him roar with pain. He is especially interesting as the direct forerunner of the clown of Elizabethan stage, as the morality plays was not like the miracle play obliged to follow the prescribed line of any given story. It had greater freedom in the handling both of plot and the characters. During the excitement of the Reformation period, it was much used for purposes of exposition and even of controversy by both religious parties. One of the finest extant example of play of every man, for instance, being written especially to inculcate the sacramental doctrine of the Catholic Church. Little by little, as the personified abstraction came more and more to resemble individual persons, the morality passed insensibly into comedy. What is known as the interlude was also a late product of dramatic development of the morality play. There is indeed some confusion regarding the exact scope and proper use of this word, for many so-called interludes are only modified forms of the morality, but in its more specific sense, it seems to mean any short dramatic piece of satiric rather than a directly religious or ethical character, and in tone and purpose for less serious than morality proper. This form grew up early in the 16th century and is rather closely associated with the name of John Heywood, who for a time was court musician and general provider of entertainments to Henry VIII. His four P's, a dialogue in which a palmer, a partner, an apothecary, and a peddler exchange racy stories, and finally enter into the competition as to which of them can tell the biggest lie, is the most amusing specimen of its class. Interlude were also used for echolastic purposes, as in the interlude of Four Elements, while in such production as Thersites, the addition of action turns the form into a sort of elementary comedy, the beginning of the regular comedy and tragedy. These early experiments in playwriting are great importance historically because they provided a kind of damn school for English dramatic genius and did much to prepare the way for the regular drama. It was, however, under the direct influence of revival of the learning that English comedy and tragedy alike passed out of these preliminary phases of their development into the form of art. Filled with enthusiasm for everything belonging to pagan antiquity, men now went back to the classics for inspiration and example in the drama, as in all other fields of literary enterprise, though it was the work of the Latin, not of the Greek playwrights, that they took as their models at first. The comedies Plautus and Terence and the tragedies of Seneca were themselves acted at the universities and on a special occasion elsewhere before audition of scholars. Then came Latin imitation, and in due course these were followed by attempts to fashion English plays more or less precisely upon the patterns of the originals. In such attempts, English writers learn many valuable lessons in our principle of dramatic construction and technique. Our first real comedy, Royster Doyster, was written about 1550 by Nicholas Udall, headmaster of Eton, of performance by his schoolboys in place of the regular Latin plays. It is composed in rhyming couplet, divided into acts and scenes in the Latin style, and deals in an entertaining way with the wooing of Dan Custance by the vainglorious hero, his various misadventures, and the pranks of Matthew Mary Greek is the jester. Though greatly indebted to Plautus and Terence, it is everywhere reminiscent of the older humorous of the miracle plays and the moralities. Our first real tragedy, on the other hand, is an almost pedantic effort to reproduce the form of spirit of Senecan tragedy. It is entitled Gorboduc, or later Pharax and Porrex, is based upon an episode of Geoffrey of Monmouth's history, and was written by Thomas Sackville, Lord Buckhurst, and Thomas Norton. The representation before the member of the Inner Temple at the Christmas festivities of 1561. It is an interesting point that this first English tragedy was also the first of our plays to use blank verse, which it will be remembered had been introduced into English poetry only a few years before. Table of the development of drama. Henry I first recorded dramatic performance in England. Henry III institutions of the festival of Corpus Christi, by which the great impulse was given to the performance of miracle play. Edward III York cycle about 1340, Chester cycle middle of the 14th century, Wakefield cycle Henry IV, Richard III Henry VII, Coventry cycle earliest extant morality play, The Castle of Perseverance, middle of 15th century, Henry VIII interlude early, The Four Ps about 1520, Edward VI Royster Doyster, Elizabeth Gorboduc and Gammer Gorston Needle, John Steele second English comedy. These all are about the drama.